Oh, absolutely. So I agree. As soon as I start talking about personal branding to someone, their stomach tightens up because they're like, oh, they're thinking about the Coca-Cola and the Pepsi and, these big brands. But when we're talking about personal branding, we're really talking about your identity. But first, start up with cleaning it up to make sure that your social media presence looks professional or at least acceptable. But surround yourself by the people who have started businesses. Surround yourself by the people who are successful.
Branding, when it comes to companies, is branding is about making products human, and personal branding is about making people authentic about themselves. Hello and welcome to Mentorship Masterminds, the PMI podcast where we deep dive into the world of leadership, networking, and professional development. I'm your host Mahesh Deshpande, and I'm excited to bring another episode of Mentorship Masterminds. In each episode, we talk to industry leaders, mentors, on topics that are instrumental in shaping our next generation leaders. Today, our topic is the art and science of personal branding. This podcast is sponsored by the Project Management Institute San Francisco Bay Area chapter, and we are recording it at the vibrant Golden Gate University campus. Today's topic is about building personal brand, the art and science of personal branding. And to talk to us about this topic, we have today with us Cynthia Estalilla. Cynthia is a career coach and has been working as an HR, started her career as an HR manager, has played multiple roles at Wells Fargo, and her last role at Wells Fargo was VP of Client Services. She is a mentor with the PMI San Francisco Bay Area chapter and is a career coach who has started her own startup. We are super excited to have Cynthia today here for our podcast. Cynthia, welcome to Mentorship Masterminds.
Thank you, Mahesh, and thank you all for being here and having me here today. Just a little bit more about me, and I think you pretty much got the whole spectrum. A lot of people usually know me through LinkedIn. Again, I'm Cynthia Estalilla, a certified career coach. I started my business actually in 2020 during the heart of the pandemic. While I was working full-time at Wells Fargo, it was an opportunity for me to take advantage of what everyone said I did really well with, and that was career development and career coaching. I'm going on my third year, and my audience is really more the people who I serve are mid-career professionals, those who, especially today, are impacted by job loss, are ready for advancement, or are just seeking new opportunities. I do everything from resume writing to career coaching, of course, LinkedIn, and personal branding as far as helping someone just, uncover their personal brand, using that through social media, everything from LinkedIn through career management. And I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining today once again, Cynthia. Your journey has been fascinating, and you have been working in the corporate sector, and you pivoted, as you said, during the pandemic into your into your entrepreneurship. What motivated you to become a career coach, right, and to help people on their personal branding journey?
Well, I can tell a personal story that I've told people quite often. Back in 2020, during the pandemic, I thought I was going to get laid off, and I was fortunate that I did not. I was able to stay on for another couple years during a transition that we were going through. And it boiled down to, I wanted to do something that was going to allow me to pivot whenever I needed to. So I started my business again in 2020. And it's been great because I got a lot of feedback. I got a lot of referrals from PMI, actually. And I also did some mentoring with the mentorship program. Yep. So that's actually what made me continue to do this.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Cynthia. So today's topic is about the art and science of personal branding. This podcast, when we started with an idea of focusing on our next generation leaders who are pivoting either into project management or are project managers, program managers who are trying to move into leadership, who are trying to move into the leadership roles. So with that in mind, we discussed and we decided that this is a topic that would be of interest to our audience members, right? So the art and science of personal branding. So my first question is personal branding. When it comes to personal branding, there is a lot of misconception or there is a lot of negativity associated with it, because it's packaged as something you are just selling, right? It's your marketing and just selling yourself. So let's start with this personal branding. What does personal branding mean to you? And like if you would like to share something about personal branding and your journey.
Oh, absolutely. So I agree. As soon as I start talking about personal branding to someone, their stomach tightens up because they're like, oh, they're thinking about the Coca-Cola and the Pepsi and these big brands. But when we're talking about personal branding, we're really talking about your identity. That's what it boils down to. I have been teaching resume writing for a long time. And especially in my career, prior to Wells Fargo, I was in human resources. And it boiled down to, it's not just about where you came from a professional perspective. It's also how your journey has been. And your journey is a combination of professional and personal. So when we talk about personal brand, it's your identity. It encompasses your values. It encompasses your interest. Right. And at the end of the day, people know who you are, and from a professional level, your subject matter expertise. So that's how it has evolved over time, especially with regards to job seekers today. And I think from an early, someone who is just very early in their career, this is the best time to really understand what that means and how to develop your personal brand.
That's great. So when it comes to personal brand, there are multiple elements associated with personal branding. Right? You put yourself on social media, how you network with people. So I would like to discuss in this podcast on each of these topics, and we will try to unravel some of the nuances associated with each of these. Let's start with social media. Today, as you are aware, LinkedIn is one of the most common medium.
Yes.
But there's also your people have their presence on Facebook and other social media posts, right? What are some of the do's and don'ts when it comes to personal branding on, say, LinkedIn? Let's start with that.
Absolutely. Actually, I can do LinkedIn and Facebook or some of the other social media concurrently. I think the first thing we should all do is look ourselves up. Look ourselves up just to ensure there is no controversial photos, write-up, comments about ourselves, right? That's the first thing I would do. And clean it up, right? Find a way to clean it up. That's number one. Number two is when you talk about personal branding, first it starts with the individual. So before you can even go out there and post and comment, right? I mean, we all are accustomed to liking, right? Liking is the easiest thing, right? Which is great. There's absolutely, I support liking. But personal branding is more than that. It's actually commenting. It's actually starting to show your subject matter expertise, right? Or starting to show connection, building community. And that's really what you're doing with LinkedIn or any other social media site. But first, start up with cleaning it up to make sure that your social media presence looks professional or at least acceptable. And second, really kind of figure out what do you like to do and how do you connect with an audience. And if you have certain interests or subject matter expertise, start finding ways to comment with your expertise or with your areas of interest with groups that are common to you.
So this also includes commenting on posts on LinkedIn that you like?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. This applies to any social media. And again, being very careful about that, right? Obviously careful with your language, careful not to insult anyone that could start any controversy. Again, you want to put together a presence that's positive, that is credible, right? And that ultimately people want to get to know you, and for job seekers, people want to hire you.
This is awesome. So, social media is one, then second one is establishing your personal brand outside social media. Let's talk about that, right? Early career professionals, mid-career professionals who are trying to establish a brand for themselves, how do they go beyond what is on LinkedIn and beyond social media? How do they establish their personal brand?
Oh, that's a great question. And I love that question because I have most of my career dealt with early professionals who I have myself helped to establish their personal brand, or at least uncover that in order to move forward, right? So my suggestion, first of all, is find those professionals who you look up to, right? And they don't necessarily have to be, unreachable. They can be people who you work with. They can be people who you go to school with. Right? They can be people in professional associations like PMI. And find that one or two people who, gosh, I would love to be in that role, right? And see, what does it take to get there, right? Especially if they are well known, whether it's in the community or locally or globally, right? What does it take? What steps did they take to get there, right? And then you kind of mimic that, right? You kind of take those steps. You kind of look at it and say, hey, I can do that. But also make it authentic and personal to you. You're not trying to be exactly that person. You're trying to apply what makes sense to me. Why is it that I like what that person is doing? And how do I apply that to my own career path so that I can get there?
Do you have any success stories to share, like how people have adopted and on this topic where they reached out, if you are aspiring for someone and you said, be a part of them, right? See what they are doing, what has worked for them, and try to imitate that or see what works for you if to reach there, right? So do you have any stories, anything, success stories to share there?
Yeah, so one that comes to mind, I remember I worked with this one woman who, she was brilliant. She has great presence. She has a great, how do you call it, following. Like folks really like her, but she just wasn't confident about herself. And so I selected her to work with me on a committee at Wells Fargo, and it was a diversity committee. And I told her, I'm going to be stepping off this soon as a leader because I need to promote someone else to lead. And I pointed out to her and I said, you can do this. And she said, oh no. There's no way, Cynthia, I can do this. I go, why? You've done so many things for the community. You are well-liked. You are smart. I mean, I really had to tell her all of those things in order for her to believe it, right? Fast forward, I finally got her to lead, and this was a West Coast diversity group. I finally got her to lead. A few years later, now she's on the national level for the organization in a diversity leadership role.
Wow.
But it took someone to push and to make her realize that she was that good. And you need to find yourself and surround yourself by people who will tell you that and help you get there.
That's such a fascinating story. I think there is also some phrase associated with that, like you are a product of the 5 most people who you are surrounded by, right? Like you're a product of that they have a large influence on who you are and who you become. So such a fascinating story. That also brings me to my next question, which is similar to, like in this story you said that you have to push someone to recognize their talent, their self-worth, and actually ensure that they follow their path and reach their potential. When it comes to social media, we also have people who are social media shy, who don't want to post things about themselves because they are thinking that they are self-promoting and do not consider that as a good thing, right? So what's your advice to our audience members who might be shy, who don't want to put things on social media because they know that they want to work on their brand, but probably are not comfortable about boasting about their achievements as well as talking about themselves on social media? What's your advice to them?
Wow, that's a great question. I get that question a lot, especially from my clients when we talk about accomplishments and we're working on their resume. And they're like, Cynthia, no. You know what, I didn't do that. So-and-so did this.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. I was on a team, and we did it as a team, right? And I don't do social media. I ain't getting on LinkedIn. I'm not getting on Facebook. I'm not, at the end of the day, first of all, especially for job seekers, Mahesh, you want the job, right? You want to get noticed. And I know that's a hard message to say that you need to find a way to get noticed. So there are ways to do that without feeling intimidated. One is get feedback from the people that you trust. Ask people, hey, what do you think I'm good at, right? What do you think I'm good at? And, come up to at least 3 things. Keep it really simple. That's how you start building your brand, okay? 3 things. It could be 3 skills. It could be technical. It could be a combination of technical and soft skills. But find the people that you trust who are going to tell you what you're good at. Then determine common themes. And then as you see things on social media that applies to some of the things people think that you're good at, you don't necessarily need to say, oh, I'm really good at that, because that could sound really boastful, but you could at least say something about it. Say, oh, I learned that. Oh, I applied this, right? Oh, we did this as a team, right? That's starting the conversation. That's already starting to say, it's called engagement. Just engage, right? The more you engage, taking it more than just liking, the more people start believing in you, and becomes this common theme. So start with the people that you trust, figuring out maybe 3 things that you're good at, right? And then start commenting on other people's posts and saying, hey, I really like that post. I've had experience with some of my team members. You can even loop in other people so you don't feel so intimidated.
Got it. This is good. I think it's also you are mentioning also about engaging is the critical piece here. It's not about the frequency of interactions or the number of comments you make, but also it has to be an engaging conversation. Have authentic, engaging conversations on social media.
Absolutely. And if I can add a little bit more to the engagement piece, more often than not, again, the common one is like, right? Or celebrate, or whatever all those emojis are, right? And then the other common one too is kind of the basic, comment of, oh, I really liked your comment, or this was a great photo, or whatnot, right? It's very generic, right? Take it a step further and say, I attended that conference and this is what I learned. And did you learn that too? And engage someone, ask a question, right? And see if they'll start engaging with you. That's called building community, Mahesh. And I think the more that we feel comfortable building community, right, you won't feel so boastful. You're just being inclusive. That's all.
That's a good perspective. It's not about boasting. It's about building community and being engaged. So we talked about LinkedIn. I want to also talk on a similar line, talk about resumes. We have many of our audience members are people who are career pivoters or who are career builders. So and you as a career coach, you're an expert on resume when it comes to resumes along with LinkedIn and social media. So what are some of the do's and don'ts on resumes? Like if you can just highlight it at a very high level.
Absolutely.
In your experience of analyzing so many resumes over the years, what are some of the things that have stood out? Like this is a mistake, this is a red flag which you shouldn't have on your resume.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked that question, because the one thing when I do these presentations, and I do presentations in the resume clinics for the mentorship program, is I have one slide that says, if your resume says responsible for, I want you to remove that now. Take that out. Responsible for is a term that's used when you're talking about a job description. I don't need to know what your job was. I need to know, how impactful were you in that job? How impactful were you in that role? Right? Those start with verbs. Okay. Accelerated, right? Improved, right? Doesn't necessarily need to be quantitative. You don't have to change the world, right? You may not have goals in your job, Right? But if you have the words responsible for, and I see that, I'm going to tell you right away, remove that and use action words, because you need to focus on accomplishments. The second thing is the top third part of your resume. So where are your contact information in that first part of your resume? That is your sales pitch. That is where your brand should be. So in other words, I need to know, once I see that first part of your resume, I want to read the rest of that resume, right? Because this person has already told me value. What value are you going to add? What have you done and what are you going to add? Right? And if I can see that, whether it's in bullet point form, 3 or 4 bullets, right? A summary of your experiences, that shows me what value are you going to add to the employer or whoever's reading your resume. I'm going to read the rest of it. If I don't see that in the first part of the resume, I may not read the rest because it's your advertisement.
That's like the ad on your Super Bowl ad, which people are going to look at and decide whether to go for it, go for the rest of it or not.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Interesting. So I want to switch gears a bit and talk about personal branding with how it differs within industries. So we have people who are freelancers who work in non-profits. At the same time, we have people who are working on corporates with a 8 to 5 job, doing various roles across various functions. So how does personal branding, are there any standards that change, that differ for folks working in non-profits or who are also students for that matter, and personal branding that is for corporate?
Yeah, definitely some very specific distinctions there, right? So in terms of corporate, there may be standards that you need to make sure your company is okay with, okay, as far as posting. You don't want to have any type of conflict of interest between what you post and what you promote, whether it's personal or professional. All right? So make sure if you're working at a corporation that or a company, small or large, whether there are standards around what is allowable, right? Number one. From a freelance perspective, like myself, right, when I starting my business, you're going to be new, right? So from a personal branding, it's obviously personal professional because you're selling your business, and you could be a solopreneur, right? Or a very small company. You just need to make sure that you're comfortable understanding what you're selling, right? And what value people are going to have with what you're selling. Because you want to make that connection, right? And if you're very new, again, surround yourself by new people. What do you do? What worked for you? What didn't work for you, right? Because as we all hear, thankfully I'm not there, but as we've all heard, companies, small businesses fail within the first 3 years, or people give up.
Yeah.
Let's say, can't do this. This is not happening, right? But surround yourself by the people who have started businesses, right? Surround yourself by the people who are successful and say, what do I need to do? How do I need to get people to resonate with what I'm delivering, right? And deliver. Make sure you are delivering and get those testimonials, right? I can honestly tell you my business, thankfully, has been 100% referrals. Because I've had people say, go to Cynthia. Go to Cynthia. I don't think they know my last name. So I need to make sure people remember my last name. But go to Cynthia. She understands. She gets it, right? But yeah, that's what that's the difference between the two.
Yeah, I think that also speaks about your brand. Right? So that's a good segue to my next question, which is about vulnerability. When it comes to posting on social media or putting yourself out there to promote your brand, there is a lot of vulnerability aspect associated with it, where sometimes you have to show your vulnerable aspect, right? So what's your advice to our audience on this aspect of vulnerability? How do you cater to that when you're talking about personal branding and sometimes you have to expose your vulnerable side? How to go about it?
Yeah, vulnerability is a very tricky concept because obviously we don't want to share too much about ourselves. When you think of vulnerability, you start thinking about your personal life, right? Like, oh, I don't necessarily want them to know that, my family is like this, or, I've had these failures in my life, right? But you do still want to connect. You still want to connect, and you want to connect with the right audience, right? So when it comes to vulnerability, going back to storytelling, right? One of the things, especially on my website, I start with the words, trust me, I get it.
Sorry?
I start with the words, trust me, I get it,
Okay.
on my website. And the reason why I say that is I've been laid off 3 times. And my audience are folks who's been laid off,
Yep.
right? I'm letting you know, guess what? I know how it feels. It feels awful, especially the first time I got laid off and I felt like I was hit like a brick, right? You need to be able to grab people's emotions, right? You need to be able to relate, but you don't necessarily need to divulge and express every personal, dark, deep secret about yourself. But if you can find subjects, if you can find stories that you can relate to, especially when you have your own business, especially if you're trying to build your career, right? It's okay to say you've made mistakes. How did you overcome it? That's where vulnerability plays a huge part in your brand.
That's powerful. That's truly powerful. I think exposing your vulnerable side is not easy, but when you go with your story and as you called out that you were laid off and putting it out there, it takes courage, and I appreciate you sharing the story.
You're welcome.
The other aspect of personal branding is authenticity. So I read a quote which said that branding, when it comes to companies, branding is about making products human, and personal branding is about making people authentic about themselves. So authenticity, as you called out previously, has been one of the key factors when it comes to personal branding. So in this today's age where we have talks of generative AI and technological trends where AI is changing the world, as well as we have now ChatGPT and other automation tools where you can easily fake personas. At the same time, you can also copy paste things. How does one go about personal branding with respect to authenticity, trying to still be authentic in this changing dynamics?
Yeah, that is an interesting one because first of all, we have to be honest with ourselves, right? AI is taking us over, right? It's taking us over. We can blink. If you don't want to talk to a chat box, you have no choice. Anytime you go on any site, there goes the chat box. That goes the same, actually, with resume writers. It goes the same with career services professionals, right?
Yeah.
Where we're trying to help our clients be their best selves and really surface what's great about them so they can go out there and express, number one, their brand, and number two, making those connections with the right people, right? With the right message. As far as, there's nothing we can do about AI other than embrace it, right? From a personal brand perspective, it boils down to, again, engaging with people so they can make the connection. This is the real Cynthia, right? If they hear or see anything that might be AI related, because let's face it, we all go into AI, chat GPT, we all research something, right? People research how to do their resumes, that's no secret, right? But how much of that is authentic to either what you've done or who you are? You know who's going to figure that out? When you get to the interview. You get to the interview, and all of a sudden you have a chat GPT crafted resume. And now if you have a good interviewer who knows how to pull information out of you, and you don't know how to, number one, express your brand or your value, they'll figure it out. And that's where your authenticity goes down. So make sure that you are connecting with the right people, embracing AI, but ensuring that those people who you are connecting with, you're showing your true self. and that you're being credible. That's what it boils down to.
Powerful. That's truly powerful. So, one of the questions we wanted to ask on this topic of personal branding is, we know personal branding is important and people are working towards building their personal brand. One thing that came up was, does it help in career advancement, especially on the monetary side, right? From when it comes to salary increments or your promotions, your personal brand, how far does it have an impact? Do you have any take on that? And if you have any stories to share about that aspect, our audience would like to know that.
Absolutely. I had one client who is phenomenal, just had really great experience, right? Resume connected, grew up in small to large organizations, same industry, same role, but took a lot of promotions. But what was interesting about this person was didn't have a lot of confidence. It was more about righteousness. It was more about, well, I've done all this. I mean, obviously, Cynthia, I should get, somebody should hire me. I mean, look at, I've had 30 years of experience. I've done the same role. I've moved up. I've been at big companies. Why do I need to be liked? Somebody who's going to just pick me up and say, hey, I can do the job, right? Well, it's interesting because likability is huge. Right? I mean, this environment, especially the environment now, is so competitive, right? And it boils down to, being comfortable with who you are, being authentic, being credible, right? But at the same time, being genuine, right? Like people could figure that out. They know how to make that connection. And honestly, this person, the example that I just gave, right, was unemployed for quite some time, but it became attitude, right? This is not about you deserving that because you deserve the next $100,000 in your bank, right? Because you feel that you've already had, salary increases through the course of your 30 years, right? Once you stop working because you lost your job, that stops.
Yep.
Right? You miss that,
yep.
Right? You miss that. So concentrate on yourself, your delivery, right? Your value, and all of that comes into play, right? Now you would be able to say what you're worth. Now you would be able to, validate what you've done. But first, you have to be able to make people feel comfortable with who you are and what you have to offer, and you have to be liked. Don't think of yourself as being righteous, because today that just is not going to cut it. It's not just about looking at the resume and say that person's worth $100,000. No, you first you need to get in, then you need to improve yourself, right?
Yourself,
and make sure that your brand and your value is matching to what you've shown. The money will come. The money will come after that.
Your example reminds me of something I learned in my MBA about product market fit. And for when it comes to pricing a product, there is cost-based pricing and various other parts of pricing, where cost-based pricing is about how much it takes to manufacture versus you add some margin and then you sell, right? But there are multiple ways of pricing, and the last one talks about value pricing. Irrespective of how much it took to manufacture the product, it's more about value that the product brings to the market.
Absolutely.
Right? You're stressing on value. Help me recollect that it's about value-based pricing. When it comes to branding, it's about the value that you bring to the table, rather than what's the effort it took for you to reach here. I think you're talking about that. We're talking about how much you are valued, rather than what efforts went behind the scenes. And you can't say that it took me $10 to come to San Francisco, take a BART, and I've made all these efforts. It doesn't matter. It's all about what value you bring and what value you showcase as your personal brand.
And if I can just add one more thing, Mahesh, we can't forget the competition, right? I think what happens is we get absorbed in the fact that, oh my God, I don't have a job. Oh my goodness, I've had all this experience. Oh my goodness, why isn't somebody picking me? But the competition is so great right now, right? You have to pivot. You have to pivot a little bit and be realistic, right? And make that connection and say, this is what I can do beside my experience, right? Find something, even distinguish yourself. It becomes finding something that's going to differentiate you from the competition, right? And do your homework, because you also could be worth that extra 50 grand. So do your homework, do your research as far as what is that role worth right now and what have I been able to demonstrate to deserve that salary.
Awesome. These are amazing nuggets. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So we are coming to the end of the podcast. I have last few questions for you. When it comes to building your personal brand, what is the role of mentorship in shaping your narrative? Do you have any thoughts that you would like to share on what are some of the do's and don'ts, and also how does one go about finding mentors?
Oh, that's great. Well, I guess it kind of connects to what I said earlier, but I think what's really important is, first of all, we need mentors.
We do.
And we need good mentors. There are, quite frankly, Mahesh, there are good mentors and there are marginal mentors. But we need mentors who want to have someone succeed. They want to have a mentee succeed. They have to have that mentality. And the mentee should have the mentality of, I want to learn from this mentor. I want to learn what will help me succeed. I want to learn what would not, what are some pitfalls, right? And as far as the mentor helping the mentee building their brand, the mentor should really be able to extract what's really great about this person and convince that person, that mentee, what those are and how to start sharing that, right? And then once that relationship starts with the mentor and mentee, I honestly think there should be follow-up, maybe a few months from now, going, hey, how did that work for you, right? And that mentee should ultimately become a mentor, to be honest with you. So I think that's the biggest thing.
Awesome. As you know, I run the mentorship program here at San Francisco, and we have seen a lot of mentees who have made these efforts to learn. They turn out to be mentors for the next year.
Yeah,
so I could relate to that, and I think that's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So other than mentors, do you recommend any books or any articles that our audience can read about personal branding to familiarize themselves about what are the do's and don'ts and probably enrich their skills?
Oh, absolutely. So the pioneer of personal branding is William Arruda, Arruda, I believe is the last name. I follow him, and I think he has a podcast, he has his own newsletter, whatnot. I don't know if maybe he knows now I follow him. But anyway, I would definitely follow him. And there's so many podcasts, there's so many books out there. But the one thing I ask people not to do, don't be overwhelmed. I think what happens is there's so much out there that we tend to read, and especially if you're a job seeker, you read, you join groups, you find 4 or 5 people to follow. Don't overwhelm yourself. Find 1 or 2 that you really resonate with, whether it's a podcast, a job search group, whatever it is, a newsletter, right? A website, a person, right? Try to limit that. But stay consistent to following the messaging. Because once you stay consistent, 1, you're not overwhelmed, and 2, you start applying what you learn. Because sometimes we tend too much to read and not apply.
That's powerful.
Right? We need to execute quickly, and I think project managers of all people know what it's like to plan and execute. Get to the execution stage.
Absolutely. Final question. What is one key takeaway and 2 actionable items that our audience members can take from this podcast?
One key takeaway is we are all different, right? Everyone's different, even though we have more in common than we have differences. However, especially if you're out there looking for a job now or trying to grow your career, you have got to figure out what your brand is now, right? If you're still looking for a job, take a few days and go somewhere and just kind of iron out, brainstorm with yourself what you're proud of. Start asking people, hey, do you think that makes sense, right? Build that personal brand statement, right? Sometimes it takes weeks, right? Yeah. But do that. Get feedback and get that done, number one, okay? And then you asked actionable. Well, that's a combination of actionable items, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, that's first and foremost, right? And number two, believe in yourself. Because if you're not going to believe in yourself, how do you expect others to believe in you?
That's true. So believe in yourself and take time to build your personal brand statement and self-realization about what you are and how to go about building your personal brand. Cynthia, this has been really amazing conversation. I learned quite a few nuggets about personal branding from you. I'm sure our audience members also would appreciate you sharing these golden pieces of wisdom. So thank you once again for being on Mentorship Masterminds. It was a pleasure talking to you and listening to you about personal branding.
Oh, thank you so much. And I really look forward to hearing success stories. I'm always about success stories. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of Mentorship Masterminds. This episode was about the art and science of personal branding. Cynthia Estalilla shared quite a few nuggets on how to go about personal branding, and I'm sure this helped you move an inch closer to becoming a better version of yourself and to help build your personal brand. Thank you for listening in. Stay tuned for our other episodes. We have episodes related to empathetic leadership, pivoting into project management. Do check out our podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Keep listening into Mentorship Masterminds with me, your host, Mahesh Deshpande. Until next time, keep thriving, keep inspiring.